I am sitting in my empty apartment right now, staring at the chair where Marcus used to sit every evening after work. 3 months ago, I thought taking a break would help us appreciate each other more. Now Marcus has Jessica by his side laughing in Instagram photos that I cannot stop looking at. I have realized I made the biggest mistake of my life by asking for space when what I really needed was to learn how to love better. Before I tell you about the worst decision I have ever made, let me know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss other heartfelt stories that might touch your soul. Now let me take you back 3 months when everything started falling apart because of my own fears. Marcus and I had been together for 2.5 years when I decided to destroy everything we had built. We both worked in marketing here in Portland, living what I thought was a perfectly ordinary life. Our routine was simple and comfortable. We would meet for dinner most evenings, usually at my place or his. We would cook together, watch Netflix shows, and fall asleep in each other's arms. On weekends, we would explore local farmers markets, go hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, or just stay in bed until noon reading books side by side. Looking back now, I realize how beautiful that simplicity was. Marcus would bring me coffee in bed every Saturday morning exactly the way I liked it, with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon. He would massage my shoulders when I came home stressed from work. When I got sick with the flu last winter, he took 3 days off just to make sure I had everything I needed. He was the kind of man who remembered my favorite flowers and surprised me with sunflowers on random Tuesday afternoons just because he knew they made me smile. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling suffocated by all that love and attention. The routine that once felt comforting began to feel predictable and boring. I found myself wondering if this was all there was to life. I started questioning whether we were together out of habit rather than genuine passion. I wanted excitement adventure, something that would make my heart race the way it did in the beginning. The tension in our relationship began building in July when I got assigned to lead a major product launch at my company. The project consumed every hour of my day and most of my mental energy. I would stay at the office until 9 or 10 at night, sometimes even later. Marcus would text me, asking if I wanted him to bring dinner, offering to pick me up so I would not have to take the bus home alone in the dark. Instead of feeling grateful for his thoughtfulness, I felt annoyed and trapped. One particularly stressful evening, Marcus showed up at my office with Thai food from our favorite restaurant. He had driven across town during rush hour traffic just to make sure I ate something healthy. While my co-workers thought it was sweet, I felt embarrassed and overwhelmed. When he suggested we spend the upcoming weekend at his family's cabin in the mountains, I snapped at him in front of my colleagues. I told him I needed to work and could not be responsible for his entertainment needs. The hurt in his eyes that night still haunts me. He quietly packed up the food and left without saying another word. When I got home 3 hours later, I found a note on my kitchen counter, apologizing for bothering me and promising to give me more space to focus on my project. That note should have been a wake-up call, but instead, it made me feel even more suffocated. The breaking point came on a humid August evening when Marcus suggested we start looking for a place to live together. We were sitting on my couch after a quiet dinner, and he was showing me apartment listings on his phone. Beautiful places with large windows, modern kitchens, and space for both of our home offices. As he talked about our future with such hope and excitement, something inside me panicked. I could not breathe. The walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in on me. Without thinking clearly, I stood up and said the words that would change everything. "I need space to breathe, Marcus. We need to take a break for a while." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus set his phone down slowly and looked at me as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean by a break, Audrey?" he asked quietly. I rambled about needing time to focus on my career, to figure out who I was, outside of our relationship to experience life independently for a while. I convinced myself that this was healthy, that couples who took breaks often came back stronger than before. Marcus listened without interrupting, his face growing paler with each word I spoke. When I finished my speech, he asked if this was really what I wanted. I said yes, even though something deep inside me was screaming no. He agreed to the break on the condition that it was temporary and that we would find our way back to each other when I was ready. The first week after Marcus left felt like exactly what I thought I needed. I could work late without feeling guilty about missing dinner plans. I could watch whatever I wanted on television without having to compromise on shows. I could eat cereal for dinner or skip meals entirely without anyone worrying about my nutrition. I went to yoga classes without having to coordinate schedules with anyone else. My work performance improved dramatically because I could focus completely without any distractions. I finished the product launch presentation 2 days ahead of schedule and received praise from my boss and colleagues. I spent evenings reading books I had been meaning to read for months. I called friends I had neglected while being so wrapped up in my relationship with Marcus. For those first 7 days, I felt proud of my decision. I convinced myself that I was becoming a stronger, more independent person. I thought Marcus and I would both benefit from this time apart and come back to each other with renewed appreciation and passion. By the 3rd week, something started feeling wrong. Marcus had stopped sending his usual good morning texts that I used to find clingy, but now found myself missing. When I reached out to him with casual messages asking how his day went, his responses became shorter and less warm. Where he used to write paragraph-long messages about his projects at work or funny things his coworkers said now, he would simply reply with, "Good, thanks," or "busy day." I noticed Marcus was more active on social media than he had ever been during our relationship. He was posting photos of places around Portland that we had never explored together. Pictures of him at art galleries, music venues, and restaurants that looked expensive and sophisticated. In all our time together, Marcus had been more of a homebody who preferred quiet evenings to busy social scenes. The rationale part of my brain told me this was healthy. Of course, Marcus should be exploring new places and having new experiences during our break. That was probably exactly what he needed, just like I needed time to focus on my career. But a growing sense of unease was building in my stomach every time I saw those posts. Then Jessica appeared in his photos. At first it was innocent enough. Marcus was tagged in a group photo from what looked like a work happy hour. Jessica was standing next to him among 5 or 6 other colleagues, everyone holding drinks and smiling at the camera. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with curly red hair and the kind of bright smile that made her look like she was always having the time of her life. I found myself clicking on Jessica's profile, studying every detail of her life. She worked in the graphic design department at Marcus's company, something I had never known because Marcus and I rarely talked about his coworkers in detail. Her Instagram was full of hiking photos, travel pictures, art projects, and images of elaborate meals she had cooked from scratch. She seemed like the kind of person who approached life with enthusiasm and curiosity. As the weeks went by, Jessica appeared in more of Marcus's photos. They were at a food truck festival I had seen advertised but never suggested we attend. They were hiking trails in the Cascade Mountains that Marcus had mentioned wanting to explore. They were at a pottery class, both covered in clay and laughing at their misshapen creations. I tried calling Marcus to talk about how our break was going, but he rarely answered his phone anymore. When we did speak, our conversations felt forced and uncomfortable. He would mention Jessica, casually referring to her as a great co-worker, or someone who has been helping me discover new parts of the city. He never said anything inappropriate or romantic, but something in his tone had changed. The jealousy started consuming me in ways I had never experienced before. I could not focus at work anymore because I was constantly checking social media to see what Marcus and Jessica were doing. I would lie in bed at night, scrolling through their photos, analyzing every smile and trying to determine if they looked like more than friends. My friends started noticing changes in my behavior. When they asked about Marcus, I would make up stories about how great our break was going and how much I was enjoying my independence. But inside, I was falling apart. I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night, waking up in cold sweats from dreams where Marcus was telling me he had fallen in love with someone else. The loneliness hit me harder than I had expected. Coming home to my empty apartment felt depressing instead of liberating. Cooking dinner for one person seemed pointless, so I started living on takeout and frozen meals. The silence that had once felt peaceful now felt oppressive and sad. I missed everything about Marcus that I had taken for granted. The way he would hum while doing dishes, how he always warmed up my car for me on cold mornings before I left for work. The feeling of his arms around me when I had nightmares, his terrible jokes that made me laugh despite myself, the way he would listen patiently when I needed to vent about difficult days. Most of all, I missed feeling loved and cherished by someone who knew me completely. Marcus had seen me at my worst moments and chosen to love me anyway. He had supported my dreams even when they were unrealistic. He had made me feel beautiful even when I was sick with a fever and had not showered in days. I wanted to call him and confess that I had made a terrible mistake, but my pride prevented me from admitting I was wrong. I kept telling myself that he would reach out when he was ready, that he would miss me as much as I missed him. But as October approached, it became clear that Marcus was building a new life that did not include me. 3 months to the day after I asked for our break, I woke up to a notification that shattered my world completely. Marcus had posted a photo of himself and Jessica at Powell's Books, both holding coffee cups and standing close together in front of a display of romance novels. But it was not just another casual friend photo. Jessica was wearing Marcus's jacket, the same gray wool coat I had bought him for his birthday last year. Her head was resting on his shoulder, and he was looking down at her with an expression of pure adoration. The caption read, "3 amazing months with this incredible woman who has taught me what it means to be truly appreciated. Thank you, Jess, for helping me believe in love again." My hands were shaking so violently that I dropped my phone and watched it crash to the floor. I spent the next 2 hours sitting on my bathroom floor crying harder than I had cried since my grandmother died. The pain in my chest felt physical, like someone had reached inside and torn my heart into pieces. Marcus had not just moved on during our break. He had fallen in love with someone else and was announcing it to the world. I called him immediately, not caring that it was barely 7 in the morning. When he answered, his voice was cautious but not unkind. "Hi, Audrey. Is everything okay?" "I saw your post," I managed to say through my tears. "Marcus, what is this?" We were supposed to be taking a break, not dating other people. There was a long pause before he responded. "Audrey, you said you needed space and time to figure out what you wanted. I respected that, but I also needed to figure out what I wanted, and I have learned that I want to be with someone who chooses me every day, not someone who needs a break from me." The coldness in his voice was like nothing I had ever heard from him before. This was not the gentle patient Marcus I had known for 2.5 years. This was a man who had been hurt deeply and had found the strength to protect himself from further pain. I begged him to meet with me in person. After much persuasion, he agreed to coffee at the same cafe where we had our first date 2.5 years earlier. I spent 3 hours getting ready, choosing the blue dress he had always said was his favorite, doing my makeup, the way he liked, hoping that seeing me would remind him of what we once had together. When Marcus walked into the cafe, I barely recognized him. He looked healthier and more confident than I had seen him in months. His hair was styled differently and he was wearing clothes I had never seen before. But most shocking was his demeanor. The nervous energy he used to carry around me was completely gone, replaced by a calm self-assurance that made him seem like a completely different person. We sat across from each other at a small table by the window, the same spot where we had talked for 6 hours on our first date. But this time, the conversation was painful and halting. I tried to explain that when I asked for a break, I had never intended for us to see other people. I thought we would both take some time apart and then come back to each other stronger than before. Marcus listened to my explanation without interrupting, but his expression remained neutral and distant. When I finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Audrey, you had 3 months to think about what you wanted. I also had 3 months to think about what I wanted and what I deserved in a relationship." He told me about Jessica and how she had changed his perspective on love and relationships. "Jessica never makes me feel like I am too much or too little. She does not need a break from me when life gets stressful. She includes me in her problems instead of pushing me away. She makes me feel valued and appreciated every single day." Each word felt like a knife in my heart because I knew everything he was saying was true. I had made Marcus feel unwanted and unappreciated. When my life got complicated, my first instinct was to push him away instead of leaning on his support. I had treated his love like a burden instead of the gift it was. I asked him if we could try again, if he would give us one more chance to get it right. I promised I would be different, that I had learned from my mistakes and would never take him for granted again. I told him I loved him and that I finally understood what I had lost. Marcus's response broke me completely. "I love Jessica now, Audrey. I am sorry, but I have moved on. What we had was real and meaningful, but it is in the past. I hope you can find someone who makes you as happy as Jessica makes me." He stood up to leave, but before walking away, he said one more thing that I will never forget. "You taught me that I deserve to be with someone who never questions whether they want to be with me. Thank you for that lesson, even though it was painful to learn." I sat in that cafe for 2 more hours after he left, staring out the window and trying to process what had just happened. The man I loved was gone forever, and it was entirely my own fault. I had destroyed the best relationship of my life because I was afraid of commitment and took his love for granted. The 2 weeks following my conversation with Marcus were the darkest period of my adult life. I called in sick to work more days than I showed up. I stopped answering calls from friends and family members who were worried about me. I lived on delivery food and spent most of my time in bed, alternating between crying and staring at the ceiling in numb despair. During those long, empty days, I was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself. I realized that my fear of commitment ran much deeper than I had ever acknowledged. Growing up, I had watched my parents go through a bitter divorce when I was 12 years old. Their marriage had started with love and excitement, but gradually deteriorated into resentment and routine. I had unconsciously decided that all relationships followed the same pattern, and I had sabotaged mine with Marcus before it could disappoint me. I also recognized that I had never learned how to be in a mature adult relationship. In college and my early 20s, I had only dated casually, never staying with anyone long enough to work through real challenges together. When things got difficult or boring with Marcus, my instinct was to run away instead of communicating about how to improve our relationship. After 2 weeks of wallowing in self-pity, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I was going to get professional help to understand why I had destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. I found a therapist who specialized in relationship patterns and attachment issues, and I committed to doing the hard work of understanding and changing my destructive behaviors. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me see that asking for a break had been my way of avoiding the vulnerability required for deep intimacy. When Marcus started talking about moving in together, I panicked because it meant I could no longer keep one foot out the door of our relationship. The idea of fully committing to another person terrified me, so I created distance to protect myself from potential heartbreak. Through months of therapy, I learned that real love requires courage and the willingness to be hurt. I had been so focused on protecting myself from disappointment that I had guaranteed my own disappointment by pushing away someone who genuinely loved me. One of my assignments from Dr. Martinez was to write a letter to Marcus, not to try to win him back, but to take full responsibility for how I had hurt him. I spent weeks crafting that letter, making sure every word was honest and sincere. I apologized for treating his love like it was disposable. I acknowledged that I had been selfish and immature. I thanked him for teaching me what real love looked like, even though I had not been ready to receive it at the time. I mailed the letter without expecting a response, and I never received one. But writing it helped me forgive myself and let go of the fantasy that I could somehow undo the damage I had caused. As spring arrived, I began focusing on becoming the kind of person who could sustain a healthy relationship. I joined a hiking group where I met people who shared my love of outdoor activities. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, which gave me perspective on problems bigger than my own heartbreak. I threw myself into my career with renewed purpose, earning a promotion and taking on leadership roles that challenged me to grow professionally. Most importantly, I learned to be comfortable with my own company. I discovered that I actually enjoyed quiet evenings at home when they were a choice rather than a default. I developed hobbies and interests that brought me joy, independent of any romantic relationship. I became the kind of person I would want to date. 8 months after my conversation with Marcus at the cafe, I met Daniel at a cooking class focused on Italian cuisine. He was patient and kind, with a quiet confidence that reminded me of Marcus, but in a completely different way. Daniel had been through his own relationship challenges and understood the importance of communication and commitment. Our relationship developed slowly and intentionally. When I felt scared or overwhelmed, instead of asking for space, I talked to Daniel about my feelings. When he suggested we spend more time together instead of panicking, I examined why the idea frightened me and worked through those fears with honesty. Daniel never tried to replace what I had lost with Marcus. He understood that my previous relationship had taught me valuable lessons about love and loss. He was patient with my healing process and supported my continued therapy work. 6 months ago, Daniel and I moved in together. It was a decision we made after many long conversations about our hopes and fears. When I felt the familiar urge to run away, I reminded myself that growth happens outside our comfort zones. Moving in together has been challenging at times, but it has also been the most rewarding experience of my adult life. I learned that love is not a feeling that comes and goes based on circumstances. Love is a choice we make every day to prioritize another person's well-being alongside our own. It is choosing to work through difficulties instead of abandoning ship when things get hard. It is appreciating ordinary moments instead of constantly seeking excitement and novelty. Marcus and Jessica got engaged last month. I saw the announcement on social media, and instead of feeling devastated, I felt genuinely happy for them. Marcus deserves to be loved by someone who recognizes his worth from the beginning. Jessica is lucky to have found such a caring and devoted partner. I have learned that some mistakes cannot be undone, but they can become the foundation for wisdom and growth. My relationship with Marcus taught me what I want in a partner and what kind of partner I want to be. Losing him taught me that taking love for granted is one of the most dangerous things we can do. If you are in a relationship right now, Please do not make the same mistake I made. Do not ask for a break when what you really need is better communication. Do not run away from love because it feels too comfortable or predictable. Do not take for granted someone who chooses you every single day. Sometimes the grass looks greener on the other side because we are not watering the grass we already have. Sometimes we think we need space when what we really need is the courage to go deeper. Sometimes we lose the most precious things in our lives because we do not recognize their value until they are gone. What have you learned from your own relationship mistakes? Have you ever let fear sabotage something beautiful in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below because your story might help someone else avoid the same heartbreak I experienced. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about love loss and the lessons that shape us. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message about appreciating love while we have it. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you treasure the love in your own life before it is too late.